Rachelle, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for asking me. I'm excited to be here.
So, Rachelle, you and I met in New Orleans at an
hmm
entrepreneur retreat, and it was so cool to hear someone talk so openly about finances and money because I feel like it's a topic that so many of us are scared or like a little nervous, right, to talk
So
about.
taboo. Yes. Yes.
So I'd love to just to hear about your branding journey. Like, how did you come to be a finance coach and expert and helping? Especially, you primarily work with women,
Yes.
and how did you start working with women to improve their personal finances?
So I've just always been a real personal finance junkie. So when I started living on my own and taking care of my own finances, I was 19 when I had my daughter. And luckily, my parents had always really instilled a real positive work ethic and a lot of common sense, finance, living below your means, and that sort of thing. And then I started reading some books and articles, and I was just really interested in how to do better all the time. And I just started taking little steps, and I'm still learning all the time. Less now about budgeting and how to cut back, and more about living to the full experience and living more with abundance and less with scarcity. It's a lot about mindset now. But yeah, I've just always been really interested in it. And I have a full-time day job as a 3D piping designer. And so it's completely different than finance. But I have used the personal finance to maximize my day job income.
So I love hearing about this shift from budgeting and cutting back and cutting expenses to now going more towards abundance and getting the most out of your life and living richly, however that looks.
however that looks for you, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Can you tell me a little bit about what was the catalyst for that shift and maybe how people and listeners can identify that shift for themselves?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think over the years, I've just, I set so many goals and New Year's resolutions to do better and be better and get better. And finally, at some point, I'm like, I think I'm good enough. I just need to have more fun. like, so, so my goals really started being much more like, how do I enjoy my life more, and how do I just kind of indulge in some of the things that life has to offer. So more travel, more time with friends and family, and creative endeavors. I started taking, when my daughter went away to college, I was like, what am I going to do with all of my time? I spent so much time just really making sure that she had like all of the experiences and the education and all of these like rich experiences. And then she went away to college, and I was like, gosh, what am I going to do? And then I thought, well, I could take all those art classes now. So that's one of the things I started doing. And I decided I wanted to write a book. And so I think, who was it I heard interviewed? I think it was Cheryl Strayed. And she said, if you want to write a book, you just need to write. That's it. And I was like, oh, all these years I wanted to write. I enjoyed writing when I was younger. And then, I grew up and I had to get a job and I had to support the family, and I had things I needed to do. And so writing and creative endeavors wasn't really on that list anymore. Sadly, for no reason really, looking back on it. But yes, so I started writing my book in the mornings before I went to work, and I was like, what am I going to write about? And I was like, well, I know a lot about personal finance, and I kind of have a different approach, so I'll write a book about that. So I started doing that about, I don't know, it probably took me 3 or 4 months, about an hour a morning. And I ended up with a 10,000 word doc. I was like, not really a book. Nobody's really going to buy this. So we kind of just set it aside. Then one day I was listening to Farnoosh Torabi on the So Money podcast, and she was talking about a commencement speech she had just given. And I went over and I listened to that. And she was talking about, a lot of commencement speeches. I listened to them on TEDx. I don't know if you listened to or the Gold Coast. They have all the commencement speeches. I really enjoy them. And So kind of the same advice that you hear a lot of times. It's like, get comfortable being uncomfortable. But it's that day, like it just struck through me like lightning. I just felt it everywhere. Like, oh, comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, what would that mean for me? And then I switched back to finish listening to the So Money podcast, and Farnoosh was saying, I'm taking co-host for the Ask Farnoosh Fridays. If you want to join me, write in. And I was like, I do want to do that. So I spent the weekend kind of rehearsing and listening to the old episodes. And then I just sent that in, and I thought that would be it, right? I mean, she has so many listeners. I just didn't think that, and so many expert interviews, like I just really never expected to hear back. And like 3 days later, I get an email saying like, we'd love to have you, and send in your bio and your headshot. I thought, do not have any of those. But it was fun, and I just went with it.
So that's really cool that none of this has to do actually with like finances, but so much of this has to do with mindset, of that shift in focusing so much on providing for your family and budgeting, that now you can shift towards yourself, and then these things start to fall into place. Like you do sit down and write that book, and it's a short book, and that's fine. And then you write into the show that you listen to, and you get a spot on that show. And it's interesting how that, like you said, the abundance mindset, it's not just about money. A lot of it is about experiences and like living your life, not just focusing on squirreling everything away.
Yeah. And I think personal finance to me was never about having stacks of money. It was always about choice and freedom, and not being stuck doing something I didn't want to do, and not having to do something that, like, oh, you don't have a choice because you've, lived to the hilt, or you've maxed yourself out. So I think that's why I've always really been interested in personal finance. I just wanted to be free to make my own choices, which loops around back to the abundance too, because staying in my day job for as long as I've been there for 18 years. It's been this great company to work for. I really just enjoyed working with the people that I work with, and we became a family, and just very cutting edge, very team centered. So it was a great place to work. They were very family focused and allowed me to, I was the room parent in my daughter's classroom every year, K through 6. So I had like the perfect blend of like a working mom and a stay-at-home mom, right? Like I didn't miss anything at the school. And at the same time, I had a career that I was doing something that was interesting every day when I left. And I was the breadwinner as well.
So it goes back to that freedom, that personal finances isn't about money, it's about having the freedom. So when you had this day job that allowed you to have flexibility and freedom, it was easier to keep it. But perhaps for other people who don't have that, it may be more difficult.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. And even for me now, like I've been there for 18 years, so it's not as challenging or as exciting as it was before. I'm starting to challenge myself a little bit more there, I guess is what I'm saying. So I say that I want to be good with my finances so that I have freedom. And yet I'm feeling like I couldn't leave my job because what if? My security gland is like really finely tuned. But I think that's a good thing in a lot of ways. I've heard a lot of creatives, Chase Jarvis for one, talks about a lot, making your art support your life really stifles your art, right? So I think there is a lot of shame for entrepreneurs about keeping their day job. I've met a lot of entrepreneurs that are struggling or cashing out their 401ks or maxed out their credit cards, and they're feeling like they don't have another choice but to make a sale. And I don't want my business to feel that way. I want to feel just like natural connections, right? I just love to meet people, and I love to talk about their life and their dreams. And so for me, selling is more service-based. It's not need-based. I don't feel like I have to have the sale. Otherwise I won't be able to make my, my next car payment or my my next rent payment, or I think that's a lot of pressure to put on a business, especially just starting out. It's hard enough as it is without having to like support you.
Well, I think you sometimes start to either resent it or feel like a failure. I would think it feels more like a failure when you're not bringing in enough to support yourself versus, well, I have this day job and now I have play money and I get to do these other things.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a really tricky situation because I think everyone's a little bit different. I know that for me, when I was starting my business, I had like another part-time freelance gig like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was easier to blend. I just took less and less of the other gig and did more and more of the business I was doing.
Yes, that's a great place to be in.
Yeah, I felt very fortunate, and the schedules were totally different, and it worked really well. But for a lot of the people I know who have that 9 to 5 or, need the health insurance, my wife has a nice job and I have her health insurance. And
Yes.
I don't take those things for granted that a lot of people have these other things and they feel like less of a entrepreneur or less of a success if they have the day job. But the fact is it's affording them to do a lot of things that they probably couldn't do otherwise, like go on retreats, take e-courses, invest in their business early on.
Oh, for sure. Yes. The retreats is a big one for me. The courses and the retreats, that's where I spent all of my bonus money last year. Any bonus money that I had, I invested it back into my business. And, I was able to use all of that as startup cost so my business is technically in the red because I haven't made that money back yet, but like I'm not carrying any personal debt for it. So that feels, it's important for me because it's what I teach. So it would be really incongruent of me to, just go the other direction in that. But the courses that I've taken, the mastermind groups, the retreats, like it's where everything is at. It's, it's so lonely. Just grinding away at this idea, when you're not getting a lot of engagement, you don't have a lot of followers, you've just got this idea and you're just putting it out there. It's so helpful to have like a community of people around you.
Yeah, I always say it's lonely at the top. Like when you're the person running your business, you're the only, you may have team members that you can talk to, but it's not the same as talking to other entrepreneurs at similar stages in their business. It's so crucial. It's like our personal board of directors, right? Like our group that we can say like, we're going through this thing, and chances are someone else, if not more people in the group, have gone through that same thing.
Right. And the people we met together at, in New Orleans with the VIP session was so fantastic because everybody was from different industries. And so it's really fun then when you can share different things that are maybe standard for your industry or but not for the other one, right? So it's like, oh, you could do this way. It's like so fresh. It's kind of like that blue ocean strategy. I don't know. Have you read that book?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I think it's great to have other people to bounce your ideas off of and just to get support, other people to just validate like this is a good idea and you do have something that people are going to be interested in, keeps you going for a long time.
Yeah. And when you're operating a bubble, it's like, is this crazy? Is this idea crazy? Like
Always.
That's the most important thing I would like want a mastermind or accountability partner for is like, am I being weird? Is this weird? Is this nuts? Is this normal?
Yeah.
Having that feedback is so crucial because we get a lot of ideas all the time. It's hard. A lot of ideas.
Well, especially when you're working at 5 a.m. or 8 p.m, 9 p.m, you do feel like, is this a valid thing? Is this like, am I doing this for a reason? Is this going to all work out somewhere? Or the schedule, I think, is the hardest thing.
With the day job?
With the day job, yeah.
For sure.
And probably even, honestly, a lot of the entrepreneurs that I know that are just starting out, the schedule's hard anyway, just making yourself sit in the chair. Especially, there's that resistance when you bump up into something that's kind of, it's probably your upper limit. And it's so easy to get up and walk away. Right. So I think the schedule, whether you have a day job or not, is, it's that time tracking and like making sure that you're doing the thing that you want to be doing and not getting distracted by all the little things that you're seeing everybody else doing. Like, oh yeah, I should be doing that. Like, well, maybe, but maybe you should focus on like doing the one thing that you're working on really well and then add that on later.
Something shiny syndrome.
So
So
many shiny things.
hard. I mean, for me, I'm pretty good at staying in my lane, but I think a lot of that is because I coach our clients to do it so much that it's like it's ingrained. Eyes on your own paper, stay in your lane, stay in your lane.
And I think you're probably pretty type A too. Like you've got a really good like organizational skill set that's like, it's golden really.
Yeah. I say I would have the reverse problem of turning it off. Is that in the early days, especially, it was really hard to walk away from the computer when I was working off of our dining room table. And my computer was always there and stuff was always there. It was really hard to like not do one more thing or to stop researching and to stop doing like tinkering was.
Yeah. I wonder what kind of energy, have you ever heard of human design or I think we talked about it a little bit at the VIP dinner actually. But anyway, there's like I've got a couple of friends that are into it. So they take your birth date and the location that you were born, and it has to do with, I don't know that much about it, but anyway, I know that my energy type is like, I think she called it like a generating manifestor or something like that. Manifesting generator. And so basically she's like, you will never run out of energy. You'll always have the idea. So she's like, you have to like really protect your own energy because you'll just keep going and going. I wonder if that's the same for you.
I'll have to look that up. I love like personality tests and stuff, but then I don't put too much stock in it. I like take that I agree with, that I don't. And then,
and I think that's what's so interesting about those too, because you can just like dial into your own intuition. Like, do I agree with this? Does it seem like me? Like if it does, I'll take it. It's kind of like, I'm not real serious about horoscopes, but when you read a good fortune and you're like, oh, I think I'll take that.
I'll take that.
Sounds pretty good. Yeah.
When you pick a really good tarot card or, fortune cookie was really good that day.
Yeah. And again, I don't put a terrible lot of stock in it, but I do find them interesting. And, if you can get inspiration from that, why not,
Well, and with all of this, that we're all so different as people, like we're all, we have different personalities. Like you said, like your risk, you're like tend to be more risk averse and need more security, where other people may not. How does this affect, when you're working with clients, when you're recommending finances, planning, forecasting? Are there best practices for everybody, or does that change based on someone's personality and how they work?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I have a system that I used, but I also realize that not everybody is wired the same way, right? So I have a couple of clients I've been working with, it's a husband and a wife, and they recently said like, we don't love the budget thing. Like we don't want to use the software anymore. It's not working for us. And I told them, I think it's important for you to do it because I think it shows you a lot of patterns and habits, and it keeps your spending under control. And like when we look at what you spent in May to what you spent in August, and you cut $3,800 out of your spending.
Whoa.
It's a huge amount, right? And they're like, we don't even think that we cut that much out because we don't feel like we did anything different. I'm like, yeah, but you were tracking it and you did do something different. So much of it is like not even conscious, right? And so I did encourage them to continue on with it. But I also said, I really respect and admire you for like communicating honestly with me instead of just pretending that you're doing it, right? So it's so much better to just say, I'm not going to do that than like pretend like you're going to do it and then feel like you're failing at it, right? So, and what I kind of had introduced to them was the concept of reverse budgeting then. first we sit down and align your priorities and your values, what is most important to you. And then we allocate money to accomplish those things. And then whatever is left over can be spent wherever, and you don't have to really worry about categorizing it all out. So that's one example. Another example is debt. I cut out debt completely. I did the Dave Ramsey plan probably 2003 to 2008, I'm thinking. It changed everything for me, not just having the debt paid off, but once you pay off the debt, you really start wondering, like, is this worth taking out money for? Like, for me, there'll never be anything worth taking out money for again, right? I mean, never say never, but there's something about drawing that line in the sand where, like, before, like, I had like this small thing over here and the small thing over here, and like, oh, well, why not take out the home equity loan to get the roof replaced? But once we started paying everything out of pocket first, I think it's really important because you've got all of your income to play with then. So all of your income can go to your most important goals versus, 30% is going out in debt payments. Like, you're already spending your money on stuff that's already old to you. Like, you haven't even made the money yet. It's really kind of disappointing when you like sit down to make a vacation goal for the year and you realize I don't have any money that can go in the vacation fund because I'm paying for this thing over here that I don't even like anymore.
So you don't advocate for any debt, like mortgage, car payments, nothing?
Yeah, I show my clients how to pay it all off. And then if they decide that it's not for them, then that's up to them. But I want to give them the knowledge of how much money and time it could save them. And if they then decide like, no, I'm okay with that, then that's okay. I showed it to you. And that's a choice and you get to make it. And I don't think that there's a right or a wrong on that. So many financial experts will give you like, this is the one plan for everybody. And, I just think there's so many people and we all have our own personality types. And I've read so many books and there's a lot of different ways to approach things. So, no, I try not to alienate anybody with the advice, right? It's like, if this is not going to work for you, what is? If this doesn't fit your personality type, what does?
It's just it's such an interesting thing to think about because obviously the idea of paying cash on a house is like, I mean, we live in Chicago, so it's like not the most expensive city, but definitely not the most affordable. And so the idea of paying cash on a house is just like, it seems so like out there. And even I recently had to get a new car and like I had, this was a must, like car died, need to transport child. Like,
right. We need a car.
And we were at the dealer. We probably could have paid it in cash. It would have been like a stretch. Like we would have been tapped. But they offered 0% financing for like 10 years or however long it takes to pay off the car. And so I was like, oh, well, there's like no interest. So I'd rather have that money in savings than gone.
No, I think it's totally cool for you to have made that decision. Like you were informed, you knew how much it was going to cost you, which was nothing. And so, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with 0% necessarily.
It's time to make payments. There's a little bit of time making payments every month for however many years. And there's also this risk of, if I crash the car tomorrow and the value is like I get from insurance is less than that's and you don't have gap insurance or whatever. Like,
I was gonna say there's gap insurance for that. So I mean I think honestly if you're offered a 0% interest deal, you're probably not at that much risk to not be able to they don't give that to everybody. So but then I will say I've met some other people too that, they're almost addicted to that 0% interest. It's like, oh yeah, but it's not, I don't know. Like, yeah, but is this something that you're so committed to that you would depart with your cash for? Because if it's not, maybe there's a better use for the money, even if you're not paying for it all up front. Right. So
So it's more like
Um,
checking in with yourself and seeing,
yeah.
would you drop that cash today, all of it?
Mhm.
And if you'd be like, oh no, then
No,
why
I'd
would you
rather
drop
do
that
this with it,
cash?
right?
Right.
And I don't know, maybe not everybody thinks like that, but like when I'm thinking, I remember I said this to a coworker one day. He said something like, "Oh, this is X amount of dollars," and I was like, "I wouldn't pay for that." And he goes, "Why not?" And I was like, "Because I have to work like 35 hours for that, and I don't, whatever it was." I said I would have to work X amount of hours to pay for that, and he goes, "What?" And I was like, "Do you not think of things in those terms?" He goes, "No, never." And I was like, "Oh, I wonder if that is the thing that separates like people who are like really into personal finance and people who are like really just into splurging, right?"
Mm.
Like if you don't make that connection between how many hours do you have to work in order to pay for something, or if I'm going to pay $15,000 for a car, I would rather go to Paris for 3 weeks or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what they are, but I'm like, yeah,
I'd rather
like,
go to Paris and then take the bus.
yeah, for sure.
There's no taking the bus. I, yeah.
Yeah, no,
I have
first
some
of
friends who
all,
have given up their cars. I'm like, well, God bless you, but I need my car.
yeah, yeah. And I will say that too. Like I live in a small town in the Midwest. So when I say that I paid off my mortgage by the time I was, gosh, I think I was maybe 32 or 33. There's a lot of like, oh, I can never do that, and maybe not. So I do underscore that with I do live in the Midwest where there's a very affordable range. And, there's a lot of good articles out there. Meet Sadie is a great one to talk about, especially in the cities where the cost of living is so high. Like maybe it's better to rent, which is countercultural. But same with everybody, will really recommend that you buy a house and have a big mortgage because there's a tax deduction, but the tax deduction is not 100%. So you need to think like,
Yeah. People forget that. They'll say things to
right.
me like, oh, well, you can deduct that as a business expense. I'm like, but I'm still paying that expense. Like, even though I'm
Right.
not getting
Right.
taxed
I
on
have to pay, yeah, I have to pay $100 to write that $30 off.
it. Right.
So, yeah. And I think it's big in the business world, and it's, also big in the homeowners world. And I think, it's just bad advice that's been repeated so much that everybody believes it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think for me, personal finance is a lot just stepping back and figuring out what is most important to you and realizing we all have our own things, right? So my big thing isn't necessarily your big thing. And so there is no one right thing to put the majority of your money to.
So, talking about this, you were saying that you have the software that you have people track their finances and that
Mm-hmm.
you have people allocate certain things. Can you just talk a little bit about best practices? Like if people are listening to this and they're like, oh God, I have no idea what either of them are talking about. Like what are some things that people
Yes.
start doing today to pay more attention and start tracking their personal finances?
Oh, that's a great one. So I love the software. You Need a Budget. It's called YNAB. It is a whole methodology, right? So I like it because it's not just a tracking expense, but it's really a zero-based budgeting platform where you sit down and decide, I have X amount of income and I'm going to budget out until all of that income is gone. And so you go down to your $0, right? And so time and money are both limited. And so to like pre-plan where you're going to put your money is the same as pre-planning on your calendar. Like the more you do that, the more you maximize your resources, right? And I think time, money, and energy are our most valuable resources, and they should, get that proper budgeting allocation. So I really like to use YNAB. And then the other thing I like to do is focus on your values and your priorities. So my first step is always like really think about and discover your why. Why is it important nobody wants to budget just to budget. Like, that is not fun. Nobody likes it. I don't care how big of a spreadsheet nerd you are. Like, it's only worth doing for the rewards. So figure out what those rewards are for you, and what's big enough for you to go through the pain and the hassle of doing it.
So that's a really interesting point too, that you budget everything down to the dollar. I think that that's a really important thing, that if every dollar should be allocated, then you're not going to throw any money away because it's all allocated.
Yeah, because so many people are like, oh, I'm going to save $200 a paycheck, but they don't have a purpose for that money. So when it comes to, they're down to that last $200, do they want to go out to eat with their friends? Yes, they do, because who cares if they have $200 in savings? But if that money is allocated and it's like Christmas, you're like, I have to cancel Christmas if I take this $200, or whatever it might be. But I think words are powerful, and I think naming your savings accounts, it just connects something inside of you that makes it worth doing.
Oh, absolutely. Because I think that all the savings, it's not rewarding to save for when we're all 70. Like,
no,
not motivating or
and so many people are like, I might not even live to be that old, right? So, I mean, they might not,
but
hopefully they do. But
yeah, but at the same time, I was listening to somebody, and now, of course, her name is escaping me, but she was saying, like, she was giving out this whole calculation of like, how much do you need to live, and what age do you want to retire, and calculate how much you need in savings, and like, that's how much, and then it's like a finite amount. Like, you're working toward this goal because you want to retire at 70 and you want to live on this amount of money. And when you reach that, then you can retire, or this is how much you have to put away every year or every month, which makes it a little bit more concrete, I think. It's also, like you said, what motivates you. My wife is highly fiscally conservative, and so it makes her feel so good to max out her 401k every year and to put a bunch of money in this, or different savings accounts, or to play with her TD Ameritrade account. Like, that makes her so happy. I'm like, that's great. That is not rewarding for me. I do put my 401k, I max my 401k because, taxes and things, but like, it's harder for me to save for those reasons. But again, it's like, if it was for the car pay, I'm technically allocating that money for car payments now. Or if I do know that we're going to have I want to invest in our company or with something big, like putting that money towards that. It's easier to save for that than it is to just like 5% of each paycheck goes to the retirement fund. It's not rewarding.
So that's really interesting. Let's talk about your different personality types with money. Are you similar, or
no, we're completely
spectrum?
We are completely different. We have very different money stories, if money stories. Her parents they didn't come from means, but the parents had means, and you couldn't necessarily tell because they lived very frugally. Her dad was a CFO of a company and was like bargain hunting at flea markets with all the secretaries. Like, it was, he shop at resale shops, hand-me-downs, like all these things. Just very thrifty. So that translated into her. I would argue, lives below her means or our means. And so that's her, lots of savings, lots of.
And that's really interesting too, because some people will take on those habits and some people will rebel and buck against them. So I always think it's so interesting. Are all her siblings the same, or is she an only child?
All the same.
That's interesting, because I see so often where like all of the kids will grow up in the same household, and like one will go this way, one will go this way, one will be neutral about it. So anyway, go ahead. What's your money?
I will dive in offline. We can dive into the psyche that is
okay.
Plan. But they are all very similar in so many ways. It's a little frightening. And then my parents did not have great money stories. They have been in debt. My father came from a very poor family, but never let on that. I actually didn't really find that out until later in life. And so, he told me things like when I was in college, I remember I had a big repair on my car, and he was like, well, if you don't have the money, just put it on the credit card. That's what it's for. And I heard that as a 19-year-old, and take that. And then I worked through college, 3 jobs, and I really wanted to study abroad, but that would mean taking time off work, spending money, all those things. And I decided to do it. I don't regret studying abroad, but I did come back with debt, mounds of credit card debt, that was difficult to get out from under. And so it wasn't until I met Nicole, fortunately fairly young, that she was influenced my money story, and we kind of both came to the middle. So I think I have become far more responsible with credit cards, not carrying debt, not spending above my means, being really, saving more, having savings, period, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think she has gotten a lot more understanding that she works really hard, so it's okay for her to spend the money that she works so hard for. I like to see her come home on Fridays with a shopping bag of like some clothing or some jewelry that she got, because before she would never get that. Or that we had a conversation the other day about, I pay all of our bills. And so she asked me, she just had a conversation. She's like, I just noticed the credit card bill was like $1,000 higher than normal. What's that about? And I was like, let me look. And I looked and I was like, oh, it looks like you like did some shopping, and we went out to dinner a few more extra times than normal. And she's like, okay. I'm like, do you want to like talk about that? She's like, no, I'm good with that. Like, we did things, we could identify clearly what they were. And so that's okay. I think that was the big thing for me too with spending, is like, if I can't remember where that credit card charge is from or what I bought with that, like I shouldn't be buying things, right? Like,
yeah.
Like there'd be like miscellaneous charges at Target. I'm just like, I don't remember. I blacked out.
Oh, Target is like great for like walking in and like coming out like, I don't know what I just bought in there, but
it's terrible. So yeah, if you don't remember, like if I can like look and there's like a $200 dinner or something, and I remember the 3-course meal, the time with friends, the amazing cocktail, like if I remember, I was like, I'm completely good with that. That was a great experience and worthwhile, and we work really hard. I'm less on shopping. If I see something at a clothing store, I'm like, oh yeah, I bought a bunch of new clothes because I had speaking gigs and media appearances. And like if I can remember exactly what I bought on each charge, like I'm good. If I don't remember, then I shouldn't be buying that.
That's a great point. So many people to buffer their feelings by shopping. And then you're probably not getting, it's probably not making you feel better for that long, right? Until you can like get it home and put it in the closet. And then, I mean, so many people actually leave their buffering purchases in the bags almost because they don't feel like they even deserve them to take them out. So one of the books that we read for our book club was Emotional Currency by Dr. Kate Levinson. And she talks about money stories, and there's a lot of really great exercises about money stories in there. And it's fascinating. I think the psychology of money is the other thing that I've always really been drawn to.
So talk about your book club.
Okay, so when I was on the So Money show, I knew I should like collect addresses, and I was like, I should make an opt-in, and I was like, I don't even know how to do that, but I've been listening to all these entrepreneur podcasts for a long time, even though I didn't even really want to start a business, because I always thought like that's kind of terrifying, right? I do like being the 9-to-5 employee who goes to work and like just gets a salary and comes home, and the health insurance and all of those things. So I thought, well, maybe I could just have a book club and people can sign up for that, because I wanted to be able to connect with the people. Personal connection is my big currency, really. It's much more interesting and engaging to me than actually the money that I make from the business. So I started this book club, and Farnoosh was so generous and offered that if we voted to read one of her books, that she would join us for a book club. So I have interviewed Farnoosh Torabi, Amanda Steinberg, which are like two of the biggest names in personal finance for women. All of that within the first year of kind of launching my website and my blog. And so that's been really exciting for me. What I love about the book club is it's a community of women who are interested in, their own ambition. They're smart, they're engaged, they show up. And so we read the book. And the author has joined us all 3 times. And so I will interview the author first, and then I open it up for discussion for the members to be able to speak to the authors themselves too. So it's really an interesting endeavor, I guess I would say.
Well, we have a lot of authors who listen to the podcast. So if any of you are if you're women writing about finance and business and things, get in touch with Rachelle and maybe
that'd be awesome.
Thank
you.
Book and you can do an interview. So I want to talk a little bit, going off of the authors. A lot of authors in particular, but some entrepreneurs have an irregular pay schedule, right? So the authors will get their advance and then they'll get or they'll get a chunk of it and then they'll have quarterly payments sometimes. And so, or entrepreneurs who do like a cart open, cart close type of launch, they have these irregular chunks of payments. What are some things you recommend them doing for budgeting and forecasting when your revenue or your income that's coming in isn't on a steady biweekly schedule?
Yeah, I love this question. So when I originally decided that I was going to work with women on their money, I thought, I was like, maybe I'll just work with women who have salaries because I know what to do with a salary, right? So first disclosure, I don't live on an irregular income. So I've seen some things that I think will work, but it's untested on my end. So the book Profit First is what comes to mind to me. Have you read that book?
Yes.
Okay. So basically what he recommends is anytime you get an income, you divide out into certain percentages, which I really love because it's the envelope system basically, which is what I advocate for doing with a paycheck. So you have your income and you divide out a small percentage for profit, about 0.5% for your owner's compensation, the 15% for taxes, and then the rest of it is operating expenses. So I would recommend setting up your income, whether it's a large amount and you have to like let it ride out, or it's a small amount and you're just getting like a little dribble. Allocating out those percentages in those envelope systems. And the other thing would be when you make your budget in YNAB, you can actually move your categories around, right? So like some of them are just like alphabetized and it's kind of difficult, but in YNAB you can set up a main category and then subcategories. So what I like to do is set up your subcategory. So it might be like fixed bills that you have to pay every month. And then I put them in order of importance, right? So like you're going to put your mortgage or your rent first because it's housing, right? So food, shelter, clothing, you want all those to go first. And then when you run out of the income, then you just going to not do those other things until you get enough income. So that's that zero based, but having it in order. And then the other thing that I like to do with my clients is to customize their budget. So when, instead of just calling it like gas and electric, we'll call it like the company that they pay. And then we'll put in the amount that it's usually, or the average amount, and then the date. And then we'll draw those in order, right? So if your electric bill is due the first week of the month, then we'll put that one in first. And then if your cell phone is due like the last week of the month, then we'll organize it by date as well.
Well, and that's particularly helpful for entrepreneurs who may have like cash trickling. I know for me, like we have clients most of them pay on time, but if they don't, it's helpful to like not pay all the bills up front and just be operating at zero while we wait for more
Yeah.
money to come in. So it's helpful to have that lined up with like when things need to be paid and when they need to go out.
Yeah. And I'll kind of do that with my savings account too, where it's like, if I'm going to draft out a certain amount for Christmas and a certain amount for vacation, like instead of doing it all the same week, I'll kind of like the 1st, the 5th, the 15th, that kind of like spread it out a little bit that way as well. And I would recommend you doing that too. If you have an irregular income, I would still recommend saving, and I would still recommend doing it right off the top, but also, doing it in small percentages that you're not going to like hurt when you draft the money out. Because if you're going to draft the money out to savings and then like draft it back in so that you can pay a bill, it's like counterintuitive. The one thing that I do have as a download is an irregular expenses worksheet. And so I recommend that you fill out any bills that are you either pay manually. I've got 2 separate ones, one that you pay manually and one that you pay automatically. And you fill in all of your bills that are paid, whether they're paid monthly or weekly. You note that in there and the amount that needs to be paid. Especially that's helpful for, a bill that's only due every 6 months. Those can really hurt if you're not setting aside for it every month. So in YNAB, you can just say like, okay, this bill is going to come due. It's $600. I can put $100 a month aside. But if you're not using a program like that, so one of my clients that I'm working with, she's like, I don't like to categorize all that. So we just added them all up and then divided them by weeks of the year. And then she just, every time they pay themselves once a week. So every time they pay themselves, they just put, $58 aside into their savings. And then when those big bills are due, then they just pull out of that account.
I like it. So we'll link to all this on the show notes. I like the idea of goal setting for clients or revenue, or for certain revenue goals, client goals, things like that. So do you use any methods for that goal setting, or is it, a whiteboard and a wish?
Yeah. So Being Boss has a chalkboard method, which I think is a fantastic method to use.
I like that. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the chalkboard method, I'll link to that in the show notes, because I actually really like the chalkboard method. It's basically every month or every quarter, you on a big whiteboard or a big chalkboard, something that you can see every single day, you actually make lines or circles or bubbles
for
you make
spaces.
Space. You physically make space for how many clients, how many customers, how many widgets sold, whatever it is, and you actually draw up lines. So if you want 10 new clients next quarter, I drew little circles, like little heads, 10 little circles, and every time you get a new client, you just erase it. And hopefully you have a blank chalkboard at the end of the quarter or the month. And you also will put some.
That's so creative.
The heads.
to put the little heads there. But that's what I love about the chalkboard method. All the different people that use it, and they're all creatives, and they're all writing in with like these really inventive ways to display it that's going to motivate them throughout the year. I think it's great.
Yeah. And the other one that I use for financial goal setting is Todd Herman. I was in his 90-day year program, and he always does good, better, best goals. And so I would put like the good goal, so he would say like, write down your financial goal for 2018. And it's not necessarily like a bottom line. It's like for me, it's a lot about creating leverage revenue streams. As I said, agency model, client services, you are trading time for dollars. With every new client, you have more expenses, that sort of thing. So creating a more leveraged revenue streams. So I had revenue goals for that specific revenue stream, or a goal for a specific program. And so I put down the goal, and then he said, okay, what would be an even better? Like, what would be like, this would be even better? And like, what's the best goal, like the best number you could hit that you could imagine? And you print out all of those 3, the good, the better, and the best, so that, like you said, you don't limit yourself, because sometimes if you have a goal, you just reach that goal. But if you also lift the ceiling as like another higher possibility, you increase your chances of actually hitting that possibility.
Yeah. So this is so much of the mindset stuff that I was talking about at the beginning when we started talking. I have this, and I didn't realize that I had it until like the last couple of years. But I've got this like great power to make myself really content, which is great because I'm a very happy, positive person that way. But also really limiting what my upper limit is because I'm not willing to put myself in that position where I might be disappointed if I don't get that thing. Right. So like I've been really good about being able to manage the money that I have. What I need to be looking at in my money growth, in my mindset, is like that reaching for more without becoming jaded or disgruntled, right? So
you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes. Yes. I think that's what all of life comes down to, right?
So, Rachelle, where would you like people to come find you?
So you can find me at theartofloveandmoney.com and sign up for my newsletter. I have a newsletter that goes out every week. And there's personal finance tips and also a lot of mindset, a lot of just living your best, most fulfilling life. So this last week, we just went through the fallback cycle with the clock. That's always a really hard time for me. So I had set up some personal self-care goals for myself for that week, and then I invited everybody to do something similar to that. So I went to bed at 8:00 every day for the week, which felt like super luxurious. I didn't necessarily go to sleep then, but I did turn into bed by then. I did a candle meditation one night. I made like a really like comforting bowl of soup one night. So I'll share like all different things, right? So some of it's money, but I kind of approached the blog and the newsletter as almost a lifestyle blog that focuses on money more so than it is just like spreadsheets and numbers.
Well, as you said in the beginning, they're all interconnected.
Yes.
So we will link to your website, to some of the podcasts that you mentioned, and to You Need a Budget as well in the show notes. Rachelle, thank you so much for spending your evening with me.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.